Hello, everyone. My name is Jane Metz. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been working with pediatrics for 10 years. It's a pleasure to be presenting to you tonight, and I hope that even if your child is already potty trained, you will hear something that is helpful and empowering tonight. So toileting is one of those very basic skills that can be very difficult for children with special needs. So I hope that this presentation will be informative for you. And like I said, even if your child has already mastered toileting, that this can be beneficial for you. So I'm gonna just dive right in. So my hope for this presentation is that you'll be able to identify how to figure out whether your child is ready to potty train, and then how basically to go about potty training in general, and finally begin to get a feel for how it could look for your child and your family based on your child's specific and special needs. So you know your child best, and you are your child's best advocate. So you really do have the power to help your child much more than I can. You are the ones in the trenches, so to speak. And so we as therapists, really, we can show you what to do, but really it's up to you on what you want to work on and achieve with your child. So I think this is really important questions to ask your therapist if you have an occupational therapist or a physical therapist or a speech therapist, or any professional really that you are working with your child. So as a therapist, I sometimes have goals for a child that the parents don't really care about. Maybe something that developmentally they should be doing, but it just doesn't mean much to the family, and that's okay. That's where you have to collaborate as a team and decide what you would really like your child to be able to do and what's realistic for the child to achieve. So when you're on the same page working together, that's when goals get met. Sometimes the therapist's goals are too lofty, and sometimes the parents' goals are too lofty. So I think you really have to know what you would like your child to achieve, and then ask your therapist what steps to take to get there. So you as the parent, like I said, you have the power to meet the goals. So you can ask your therapist to help you formulate goals that are SMART. So the acronym SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So the kids on my caseload whose parents actively participate in the home program, they follow the recommendations, etc. Those are the kids that meet their goals and who get discharged from therapy ultimately. And here's why. We as therapists, we're not miracle workers, and we cannot, make lasting changes. That happens in your home. And like I said, we can show you what to do and how to do it, but it's up to you to do that. So I'll just give an example. With the global pandemic of COVID, I have seen kids achieve skills like wiping after having a bowel movement that they have been working on for years. But it wasn't until they were home quarantined with mom and dad full time that they had the time to practice it. And the motivation to really work on it. So the saying, practice makes perfect, it really does. It's true. So first decide what your goals are, and then you can ask your therapist how to break down the task into steps and how to address each step. So inevitably, you'll touch on the skills that are needed to do each of those steps. And then I have here too, the sensory piece. Asking your therapist, what is sensory? How do we address that? Have you evaluated sensory integration? Because there are tools out there to do that. And then create a sensory lifestyle for your home, for your child, to meet their needs. And I'm going to kind of mention what to ask your therapist throughout this presentation, because the sensory piece is just so big. Okay, so how do you know if your child is ready to potty train? Where do you begin? Where do you start? So I'm going to kind of list a few things that are helpful for us to guide us in this process. And the first one here is a big word, interoception, but that just basically means the ability to feel one's internal organs. So when you're hungry, you eat. That's, you're feeling your stomach is shrunken up and it needs to be filled. So that's interoception. You're doing that there. It's the same for bowel and bladder. Okay, so if the child can actually tell, I have to go potty, that's that skill there, interoception. Okay, other indications that your child might be ready to potty train, they stay dry all night. If they're wearing a diaper or a pull-up or whatever, and they go to sleep and wake up the next morning and they are still dry, that's a good indication that they might be ready. Going at certain times in certain places, you might find them crouching down behind the sofa or going to a specific area. That's a good indication that it might be time. If they're showing an interest, they're talking about it, they're asking you about it, they want to come in the bathroom with you, they want to know what each part does, they want to flush the toilet, things like that. And then a really good one is if they tell you. This is part of that interoception too, but also a sensory piece here is being able to sense, I am wet, I am dirty, I am uncomfortable. That is also a good indicator that a child might be ready to potty train. So if your child meets this criteria or some of these criteria, and you think that your child is ready to potty train, then you need to decide if the child has the other skills necessary for toileting independence. So you can start working on those skills that they're going to need for all the steps of potty training. Okay, so fine motor, doing fasteners and pulling down pants and things like that. But really starting from the bottom and working your way up, because typical development, you know, kids aren't ready to potty train until about 18 to 36 months. But if you think about a baby, you know, a toddler at that age, they can't do buttons at that time. They can't pull their pants down and things like that. Most of them can't in those early months. So, you know, starting with what they can do and building from there is really key. Okay, so special considerations for potty training. Postural control is a big one. Do they have the righting and equilibrium reactions to do this task? You know, what do their fine motor skills look, gross motor, visual motor, their motor planning and praxis, bilateral integration using both sides of the body together. What are their cognitive skills like? Can they even understand what's happening? Do they care about toilet training? And then sensory processing concerns, like I mentioned, this is a really big topic. And there are actually 8 sensory systems, and we're going to kind of break those down and go into those in a little bit more detail, just because it's so important to this activity. And then finally, of course, fear. And that goes hand in hand with sensory integration. We're going to just go into that next. Okay, there are 8 sensory systems, not just the basic ones, taste, touch, sight, smell, etc. Those are definitely important, but they're not the only ones. All right, so in addition to tasting, touching, sight, seeing, hearing, smelling, we also have vestibular, which just means your sense of balance, your awareness of where your body is in space, your head, awareness of how fast you're going. And then proprioception is input to the muscles and joints that informs where we are in space. Okay, so if you think of anything pushing and pulling, I like to give the example, this is why a massage is so calming and relaxing and feels so good, because you're getting this deep pressure to your body and it's creating a calming sensation over your body. Now, some of you may not like that sensation, and that tells you your specific sensory need in this area. So we all have different preferences and needs in our sensory system, but I like to give that example because that kind of helps me understand proprioception. Interoception, like we talked about, is the 8th system. That's being able to feel your internal organs. So whether your bladder is full, your stomach is empty, things like that. So just having a brief overview of these 8 sensory systems. going back to the idea of fear, the bathroom can be too loud, too bright. It smells funny. It's too cold. Maybe the child doesn't like his pants being pulled down because of the way that that feels. There are so many different sensory components that go into this activity. And so think about your child and think about if they do have fear, think about what exactly they're afraid of, and that will cue you in to what's going on in their sensory system. And it'll give you a good idea of how to address those problems. Okay, I'm going to go into some of these sensory issues in a little bit more detail because I think it's helpful to be able to understand your child. And I may kind of describe your child, you may see here. So under sensory modulation disorder, we have 3 subtypes. There are sensory underresponsive, overresponsive, and you may have heard this term sensory cravers or sensory seekers. So if a child is under-responsive, their threshold for sensory input is too high. And so they need to get more input to get to a normal response. So they might feel things a little too late and a little too little. These kids might seem lethargic, slow moving, and then these kids tend to choose sedentary activities. They don't respond to their name being called, et cetera, et cetera. So they need more of the input to get a quote unquote normal response. So these kids are going to need a combination of movement and deep pressure input to improve their threshold, right? To kind of lower that threshold to a little bit more of a normal level. And that's something that your therapist can help you with. Activities to help that child on a daily basis to get that right amount of sensory input. Okay, if a child is over-responsive, it's just the opposite. Their threshold for sensory input is too low. And so the reaction is too big, too quick, or it lasts too long. So these kids might be scared to swing or be up too high or go too fast. They might hate their hands being messy, or they might cover their ears if they think something is too loud. So these kids need input that starts slow and low and then builds to improve their threshold, make their threshold a little bit higher, and also to desensitize them to that sensory input that is so offensive. Okay, and then sensory cravers or seekers, these are the kids that are constantly moving. They're always on the go. They crash into things. We might describe them as a bull in a china shop. They love to spin. They stuff their mouths when they're eating. So with these kids, we need to give them the input that they want, but not too much so as to disorganize them. So it's sort of a nice balance to get them that just right level of input. So then we go into sensory-based movement disorders, and this may describe a lot of kids as well. So under this category are 2 subtypes, and that's dyspraxia and postural control disorders. So dyspraxia just basically means having difficulties with ideation, sequencing, motor planning, and or execution. So these kids might look clumsy, have trouble learning new things. They might have poor ball skills, poor fine motor control. They may look awkward. They may be accident prone. And so they may tend towards sedentary activities to hide those difficulties and also to keep themselves safe. Motor planning then is seeing what needs to be done, sequencing the steps, and then doing it. Okay, so thinking about getting dressed or toileting, that's ideation, organization, and execution. And then with postural disorders, that's just basically difficulties with overall muscle tone and trunk strength. So kids lack the stability to perform everyday tasks. And if you think about it, only when we have good stabilization can we do more than just be, right? Like reaching, pushing, pulling, organizing our movement to do specialized things. That trunk strength and postural control is really important. So your child may have one or several of these difficulties together. And so again, the fear of the bathroom or of toileting can stem from these different sensory processing difficulties. And you as the parent probably know what your child is afraid of. And I hope that this helps you understand why, so that then you can address it. Okay, so what do we do for these kids with these difficulties? You know, if it's a fear of, you know, having too much light, too echoey, you know, the sound is echoey in the bathroom, all of these things, there are different things you can do, very simple things. You could just have night lights in the bathroom and turn the lights off. You could put pictures on the wall. You could play music so that it's a little bit less distracting when the potty noises come out, right? If the toilet seat is too cold, you could warm it up with a hairdryer. You could put a special seat down. And on that note, I would say, you know, involve the child in the process. So it no longer is, this is what we're doing. I'm doing this to you. I'm putting you on the toilet. It becomes, let's do this together. You show me how you want this to go or what you want this to look like, and then try to, you know, compromise with what the child is expressing to you, whether that's verbally or not. So you really have to be a detective and figure out what's bothering the child and how you can help them with that. It does not have to be traditional, you guys. It does not have to look like it's supposed to. It can be adapted and modified to fit the child's needs. Okay, so I am going to circle back to this concept in a few minutes. And this is another thing that you can ask your therapist to help make it easier for them. Okay, on this slide, I have a couple of different potty chairs. So this is actually one, the pink one, the cow, is just kind of cute. That sits on the floor, actually. Okay, so it's not even on the toilet, it's on the floor. So with littler kids, this is really helpful. This is like a starter potty chair. Not everybody has a little kid at this point. You know, we may be working with older kids. So there are also all kinds of special seats that you can look for. I just Googled these, I looked online. This is a seat that sits right on top of the toilet chair. You can see that this blue one in the top corner, it's got little handles for the child to hold on. It's got a little bit of a back, which can be more comfortable. The seat looks a little bit more padded, and it does have a guard for boys if they're sitting down to go potty. Okay, the next slide is going to show you some more. All right, so having the feet supported is really important, as you saw on the last slide. So this step-up stool has that adjustable foot rest. And again, there are arm rests or handles here for the child. The P guard is up there and it sits right on top of the toilet seat. So I really like this one on the left here for smaller kids or kids with postural instabilities. Here on the right, this is actually an over the toilet commode. This is an adult piece of equipment. And this is going to be good for kids with difficulty with postural control. Armrests are going to be really important for those kids. And you can see that it's a little bit higher up. Again, you're going to want feet supported. So having a stool there, or if they're long enough, their legs are long enough, then this is going to be just about perfect for them. And also you can see that there's a bucket underneath this over the toilet commode. And that can be helpful if kids are afraid of the splash, if they're doing a number 2 there, or just simply, you know, not having as much space between their body and the surface. That water can be pretty abrupt if it splashes them, or if they hear it or see it visually. So, you know, keeping that in mind for them is really important. And then I wanted to show this too. So this is actually my setup in my home on the left here. We just have a cushioned seat and then of course a step stool. So I actually do have, I have a 4 and a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old is actually potty training now. And so this is his system. He just walks up, I help him turn and sit, and his legs do dangle a little bit, but his toes are close enough that he can reach. And this works for him. That seat is nice and cushioned. I can position him so that pee goes down, and that it just ends up being pretty comfortable for him, but this isn't right for everybody. On the right-hand side, this is a chair. And again, the commode sort of setup is pictured here, but I like to show this because you can make your own. You know, if you can't get the equipment or you don't have access to this fancier type of equipment, you are more than welcome to create what might work for you. So I like this picture because it shows kind of like the bowl underneath. You know, if you have a lawn chair or something like that, that you could cut the seat out of in a way, and position something under it, to make a seat. You know, the sky's the limit. It doesn't have to be fancy, and it can be homemade. Okay, visual aids are really handy for kids. So I'm showing you a couple of books and resources here. This Once Upon a Potty book by Ilona Frankel is really great. They have them for girls and for boys, and there are different types too. So this is a great book when you're first talking about potty training. It normalizes the process. You know, we all have to go. And so it really touches on, this is a normal thing. This is not, you know, for a certain type of people. We all have to go. We all have to take care of our bodies. And I really like to say that. And I'll touch on that a little bit later too, on taking care of our bodies. So having a book to go off is really nice, that you can read with your child, look at the pictures and all of that. But there are a couple of other things I want to talk about too. One is a social story. So this here on the right is a social story, and you can search for these online. There are a million examples of social stories for not just toilet training, but other things as well. So I'm going to talk about, you know, female menstruation, that whole process. You can find a social story for that as well. And these can be really helpful for kids, especially with diagnoses like autism, to help them really wrap their minds around this process and what we expect of them and what we, you know, hope that they will achieve. So social stories, you can also write your own, and you can have your child help you with that too. So social stories are great. The other piece that is helpful are visual schedules. Now we talked about that and looked at that a little bit more in detail with toothbrushing with Erin. But here are two examples, one for boys and one for girls. This is what I was talking about, breaking down the steps. That's what a visual schedule is. It's got a picture of each of the individual steps of the task. So that's where breaking down the task becomes really important. And, you know, for kids who aren't verbal, pictures can just unlock that comprehension piece for them. So having a picture of each individual step and going through that with them can be so helpful. And we're going to talk about too how you can use visual schedules for all sorts of self-care activities, not just toileting. Okay, so now, what do we do with all of that information? You know, you've determined whether your child is ready, or if they're older and maybe they're not ready, but they're getting bigger and it's hard to change them. And you've just sort of decided we've got to do something different. Now, what do we do? So the next couple of slides are going to be for sort of like a typical development sort of potty training layout, but it can be adapted to children with special needs. So first, what I like to do is plan a start date. Circle it on the calendar, whatever you want to do. Talk about it, get ready for it, get excited about it, plan it out. When you go to do the potty training itself, it's helpful to have an extra hand or three. So a lot of people will do this over a Christmas break where the other spouse is in the home, you know, having a sibling help. Just, it's sort of an all hands on deck situation. So So we will talk about how this is going to look. And then you're reading those books, you're reading those social stories, you're talking about it, you are preparing with the equipment, you're asking for the child's input. What would you like to sit on? How do you want to decorate the bathroom? Anything. The sky's the limit with this. And then you're going to stick to your plan. You're going to figure out when you're going to start, and then you're going to figure out all of the steps that you need to take to get there. And then you're going to do it. What's key here too is anytime we're potty training, you need to expect accidents. Accidents are going to happen. They are okay. But it's really important to note that, that even though it's okay and you're not going to shame the child, that pee and poop go in the toilet. So continually coming back to that, because you want to reinforce the skill that you want. Okay, so this is a general layout of how, so for example, this is what we did with my son, both of my sons, actually. We did it over a weekend. They were very close to being 3 years old, so they're definitely developmentally ready, doing things like staying dry all night, being interested in the potty, things like that. So after you have chosen your start date, this is what you're going to do. So, and again, we're going to adapt this for kids with special needs, but this is the general way to potty train. And if you've already had a child that's potty trained, an older sibling or whatever, then just think back to that, okay? And as your framework of reference for what you're going to do. So I'm just going to kind of go through this quickly, but first thing in the morning, you're going to go to the bathroom. You're going to sit them on the potty, and then they're going to be naked for the rest of the day, or they can just wear regular underwear, not a diaper. Okay. You want to keep them moving and give them lots of liquids. Once they're sitting on the potty, they can have anything that they want to eat or drink. And you really want to make it fun and engaging. And if sitting on the toilet is difficult, then you might do things like set a timer, present rewards, things like that. And then you want to sit the child on the potty every half an hour based on the interval between when they are typically going. So for my son, in the morning, the window is a little shorter. It might be 30 minutes to an hour, but in the afternoon tends to be more like 2 hours, where, he's staying dry and he's not having to go, not doing a potty dance, things like that. So you can play a game in the bathroom, you can sing songs in the bathroom, really just making it fun and exciting. And then of course, if and when they do go on the toilet, you have a party. You reward them. They can open a small gift or a special treat. They can put a sticker on a chart. Anything that's motivating to them, you can reward them with. And then you go back to moving and playing. You watch them carefully, and you repeat the process over and over and over again. Okay. In addition to that, I said, we talked about taking care of our bodies. You want to talk about that process and normalize that. So what we eat and what we drink, our body uses to make us grow and get stronger, and then it has to come out. Okay, so you can make any story you want. You can make it however you want to normalize that and to motivate them. Now, poop splashing into the toilet can be traumatic. So like I said, you can modify that so that it doesn't make such a big splash, or you can celebrate the splash, and I would definitely recommend that, if your child is afraid of that. So you're going to continue that pattern until your intervals between potty breaks it gets longer, and then eventually the child learns to recognize when they have to go to the toilet themselves. And that's kind of how that process goes normally. But you as the parent have to kind of facilitate that for as long as it takes. And if you've potty trained before, you know that that's true. Okay. One thing that's important to note is that bladder continence goes first. That's what we typically have control over first. So just expect that potty is going to come first and poop is going to come later, and it's going to take longer to train bowel movements. Okay. All right, so if your child is different, now what do you do? Okay, here are some modifications. You can schedule those potty breaks, putting your child on the toilet according to when they already normally go. So if their diaper or their brief is soiled at certain times of the day, you just know, okay, my child pees at 11 and 3 or whatever. You can put them on the toilet during those times. There's nothing wrong with that. Or if there are certain things that your child does that you recognize, oh, they're going to the bathroom, put them on the potty. They can do that there. It's going to take some time, but even just having them in the bathroom during that time is progress. And then I would say to involve your child in the process. So for diaper changes, helping you with clothing management, pulling down their pants if they can do that, anything that they can do, capitalize on that. Have them help with that process. Again, you don't want it to be, I'm doing this to you. You want them to be doing it with you, or for you to be doing it with them. So like I said, you can create a visual schedule together. I think there's so much power in that. You can play games to learn the process of going to the bathroom on the toilet, reading books, reading social stories. This could take you a bit of preparation to get ready for that, and that's okay. And then of course, you can modify the task. The toilet doesn't have to be in the bathroom. Like I showed you that chair, you could put it, if there's a special room they like or a special corner or something, of course that's not ideal, but it's okay. You can always work towards the end goal, and it doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so this part is huge. So notes for teaching self-care in general. All of those basic tasks, bathing, dressing, grooming, hygiene, that's all self-care. If your child isn't really ready for potty training, but they're getting older or they don't have all of the skills, like I said, you can use those visual schedules for children who are nonverbal. Pictures make a lot more sense than words for kids who are nonverbal, or lots of kids with autism, things like that. So putting pictures in sequential order in a way that lays out how to do the task can be groundbreaking. And then also important is however you do the task, or in your family, in your culture, that's how you want to teach the task. Okay, so I might do hand washing or teeth brushing a little bit differently than you do. That's okay. You want to teach your child the way that you would teach them, not the way that the therapist would teach them, unless there's something fundamentally unsafe or, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That would be another thing to ask the therapist about, is safety and, the safest way to do things. But you really want to involve the child in that process. So, if they put the toothpaste on before they rinse it, that's fine. That's the way they do it. You don't have to teach it the other way around if it's going to be too hard to learn that way. So just to give an example, to teach it the way that you do it is perfectly all right. All right. So whatever way you do that task, you have a picture for it, and that can be applied to anything, like I said. So you need to go through each step with the child, break the task down into steps, do it the same way every time. If they know how to do a skill at home, then you need to begin to generalize it to other settings. So this can be really hard for kids. And a lot of times I'll hear, my child can do this at home, but not at school. And that's because sometimes kids have a hard time generalizing a skill. So they might master it at home, but the way that the school toilet is, or where the faucet is, or where, just the process of doing that is totally different. So then you have to begin to teach the skill in each specific setting, because we can't expect the kids to generalize that information. Some kids can do that, but a lot of kids can't. So you have to understand that you may have to teach the skill in every single setting in which you expect that child to do it. And that can be hard, but it also can be done. So, our visual schedules can be very low tech. You can draw them yourself. They don't have to be fancy, like I said. And then the other piece that I wanted to share is that it's helpful when you're doing something like bathing for like the dad to teach the son and the mother to teach the daughter, just because we tend to have a better specialized understanding for our gender. So really teaching each and every single step, specifically the way that you want it done, for thoroughness, for cleanliness. We can't expect the kids to just be able to infer that information. So we really have to be very specific, teach every single step. Then, let's see, I'm having difficulty bringing up my notes here. A note for school is collaboration. So you may need to teach the paraprofessionals or the school staff how to help your child very specifically. And I find that the more you can collaborate, the better the child does and the better the school staff feels and you feel. And if you're all on the same page, that is just the best case scenario. So you may need to teach the school staff and then have them demonstrate that to you. Write things down, get it on an IEP like we do in the States. That's what we have here, a document to kind of keep us accountable. But you may not have something like that. So just having something written and making sure that the school is following through. So that may mean you have to go in to the school, to do some initial teaching or record a video. And it can be hard, but if you are able to do that, then the child will be more successful. And a note on visual schedules as well is what can be really helpful is to actually take a real picture of the child doing the task and doing each step of the task. Then you could have one for home and one for school. And some kids do better with that when they recognize themselves in the picture. It doesn't have to be that way, but if that's helpful for your child, then that can be really powerful. All right, so thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was helpful. Please reach out to me with any questions. I would love to clarify anything or to provide more in-depth information. I know that this is sort of an overview, but it's also a lot. So I hope that that was helpful. And thank you so much for having me.